So Pat, thanks for doing a follow-up. I enjoyed it so much, and there's so many things we talked about that we just kind of touched the surface on last week. So I wanted to, talk more about those things. Like for example, you shared with me your brilliant short story called Clotheslined, which I think everyone should go to Amazon and get. It's a great short story. It shows what it's like to work on a Hollywood set, a sports football game, but it also shows kind of the quirkiness of that world, which I enjoyed. Work with Oliver Stone. It was the movie Any Given Sunday, and you had written a book, and you talk about this in the story on Any Given Sunday. Yours was more about how gambling could influence the outcome of a game, whereas Oliver Stone was, God, it was so wild and crazy. There was a lot going on in that one. But he ended up stealing one of your scenes from your book, and there was some intrigue going on, and you were there for you were invited for a reason. But anyway, first thing I wanted to talk about is when you were talking about the Jim Brown and Y.A. Tittle,
right?
You expressed that they had ownership when they talked about football that you didn't experience, and that kind of struck me because I'm sure my guess would be now it's even less so. There's no quarterback that calls his own plays, and that probably everything is more choreographed. I guess maybe I'm wrong, but anyway, can you explain that to us a little bit more? Because we all know Tom Landry was an innovator. I mean, he invented the shotgun. Not invented the shotgun. He brought the shotgun back. His linemen, take a look at the linebackers before they got in the 3-point stance, and people say he invented the middle linebacker. Every team played the 5-2 before, and when he was at the Giants, he nose tackle back, and that was Sam Huff.
Sam Huff.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, can you talk a little bit about that? How your disappointment, or almost maybe you're a little bit jealous of them, how they talked about football like they were really part of it, and when you felt like you were just a cog in like a big wheel.
Right. Well, it was really interesting because between Tittle, Brown, and myself, Tittle was approaching his mid-70s. Brown was maybe 63, and I was early 50s. So we're 3 generations.
Yeah. Just to be clear, that's Jim Brown, the Hall of Fame running back, and Y.A. Tittle, who played quarterback for the Giants in the late 50s, early 60s.
Right. Hall of Famers, everyone. Now, I'm not that. I wasn't of their caliber. I was there for another reason, but I got to listen to these guys talk about the games, and what I gathered was that in the 50s, right, those guys controlled the game. The linemen, you'd come up, there'd be a defensive formation. The offensive linemen would call signals to each other for the blocking on whatever, sweep right. You call sweep right in the huddle, and then you get up there, and the lineman would call the blocking according to what the defense was. And so there was a lot of autonomy. The quarterbacks would call their own plays. Same thing. He would check off if the defense was this or that. And what had happened was all of that autonomy then, as I listened to him, I realized that we didn't have anything like that. And then I thought about how Landry's offense was, he would, you say power 28 near GO, and in the play call in the huddle, and he would be sending in the plays, there would be that, and that tells you exactly that signals what you do. 2 back through the 8 hole, sweep, near GO, offensive guards, pull, and block out. And so all of that responsibility that was on the players is now gone. So you're just out there executing what you're getting from the press box and from the coach. And they had that sense of being more a part of the game overall than we ever had. We were just cogs in the wheel, as you mentioned. And so that was really startling to me. And I realized that was that aspect of the game, which my father and my uncles, they all loved so much, those guys, Tittle, Brown, they were in charge of the game they were playing, and it was all gone. I realized it was gone.
Do you think it's gotten even worse today? So that was that was 20 years ago. But you played, 1980 was around your last year. You think it's gotten even more extreme now?
Well, yeah. The passing game it's like pinball now. Ding, 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 just boom, boom, boom. Back then there would be 12 passes a game. 25, 30 running play. It was a run-dominated game with passes offsetting the run. And now it's just ding, 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 ding. It's just get that, put the ball down the field, put the ball down the field, put the ball down the field. And so it's quite a different game. I don't watch as much as I used to.
Yeah,
I'll tune in after the pinball game has been going on for a while and see what's happening at the close.
Yeah. What's interesting is the NBA is the exact opposite. So in the 1970s, the teams called plays. It was half court. It was very structured. Now it's completely free flowing. The players go down and it's very much it's all improvisation. So basketball's gone the exact opposite way the NFL has gone.
That's interesting. They cross the half line and the ball goes up.
Ball goes up. It's all free flowing. They don't call plays. The ball can go wherever the players see the numbers advantage or an open man.
Right. No, that's it. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we can get back to on any given Sunday in a second. But with Tom Landry and his innovations, before, I mentioned the shotgun and the way the linemen would get their stances,
Up and down, right.
the up and down, which you had never seen. Also the flex defense. So and I did some research on this because I always thought the flex was just that they offset each other the distance from the line of scrimmage. But also what Tom Landry had invented was you held your position. When the running play would come, they wouldn't try to tackle the runner. They would hold their areas of the field, which he's actually learned coaching against Vince Lombardi in practice. Vince Lombardi wanted to run to daylight,
Right.
and Tom Landry didn't want to create any daylight for him. So that's how he kind of created. So, these kind of things that Tom Landry did you see a lot of this? Was he always innovating like this?
Well, he had pretty much settled on what he was doing by the time you get there. And that's why it took 3 years to master the defense, because it was all counterintuitive. It was set up to position basically the middle linebacker to make the play. And so you kind of took a shoulder and did this, went the opposite, and then you're opening a channel for the middle linebacker. And on running plays, maybe the tight end would come down and try to hit him, but the linebacker on the strong side on the tight end would do something, hold up the tight end. So Leroy Jordan, who was the middle linebacker there, could have a free shot at you're funneling the offense to a place where you have somebody to meet the play. Now, interestingly, you remember all of the massive middle linebackers back then. Dick Buckets, 250, these giants, head rippers.
Yeah, Willie Carson
You're right.
Yeah.
Jordan weighed 215. So it was speed and quick. It was quickness. I don't know that he was fast in the 40, but he was very quick at 215. He played for Bear Bryant, and he'd get in the hole and stick them. And that's how it was set up. So it was fascinating on one level. It was counterintuitive on another. I did much better when I went to Oakland, where the defense was tackle the man with the ball. So.
Yeah. Well, one thing it came across in Clotheslined that didn't come across when I talked to you last week is you didn't care for Tom Landry so much. I mean, in the book, you can kind of feel that. Whereas, when I was talking to you last week, you said pretty positive things about him. I mean, he was a very analytical type of guy. He definitely was the opposite of Lombardi, the way Lombardi coached. So what are your true feelings for him? Is he difficult because he takes the human element out of the game?
Well, for me, it was. I grew up in a military family, so I was used to that kind of stuff. and I didn't like it. I wanted to play, and rather than be a cog in a wheel. I'd been a cog in a wheel. And so, but no, he's a good person. He's very smart and shrewd, and he's also very stubborn about what he was doing. And he would tend to, if there was a breakdown in the defense, we'd have a game plan. Ends were supposed to do this, this, and this. Then you get in the game and you do that, and they've changed. They've adapted to the flex. And so the defense is not good for the play being run. He then would blame that on the players. And that just drove me nuts. And I had a confrontation with him one day where this happened. And the other thing he would do is have game films with the whole team present. Most teams you break up in position groups with your coach and it's over in 40 minutes. We would have these 3-hour sessions where he would go through every player and every play. And he hit this one sequence, and players dealt with this in different ways. Larry Cole would pass out, But after the film session, I went out and caught him at the weight station, and I took the game plan. And because he was putting blame on Cole and I for something that we were executing the game plan as he wanted. So this is just me being petty, having grown up in a military family, right?
Yeah.
And I said, Coach, you said da-da-da. Here's the game plan right here. And this is exactly what we did to your specifications. Mm-hmm. And he took it in, and then he looked at me and he said, "You think too much."
Yeah. That's
and that really hit me. I thought,
exactly.
I didn't realize thinking was a not a good trait.
Yeah, shut up and play football.
Exactly.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting also on the set, and when you describe on Any Given Sunday, is the difference between Jim Brown, who is a seasoned Hollywood actor. He knows what's going on. You're kind of up for anything. This is something that's new to you. And then Y.A. Tittle, that was really fighting the whole experience. He'd rather be on his farm in New Mexico or Arizona, where he's from, fishing or whatever. Why don't you talk a little bit about the personalities on the set?
Well, it was interesting because Y.A. was a conservative Republican, right, from California. And then you have Jim Brown, who's doing all this work in the Black community at the time. He had all kinds of programs. And Tittle, Y.A. said, "That's just a bunch of drug dealers." He had that. He lived in Palo Alto then, but he's Cato Lake in East Texas was where he went a lot. Tittle and Jim Brown. He sort of, as we were working on the film, all these young Black players would come up to him, and he would talk to them. He would spend time with them. He would mentor them in a way. And we saw this, and it was because all the extras were like from the Arena League, right?
Yeah.
And so Brown would mentor them, and I found it to be extraordinary, these exchanges, and then Y.A. was just, they're just a bunch of drug dealers, and then Brown, then I asked Brown, he said, this was why he didn't come out front with what he was doing besides his acting career, because it met with this kind of collision from more conservative folks. And he just didn't have time for it, But to see it all enacted was really powerful and fascinating.
When you got a chance to watch the movie, what did you think of it? I thought it was over the top. Oliver Stone tends to do that. I'm more of a Rudy guy, or right. Yeah. But what did you think of the movie? What's your?
I thought the same thing. I thought it was over the top, and then being there, Al Pacino's a great actor, but he's about 5'6".
Mhm.
And so you have this, there's no, and we talk, Till and I talk, I said, have you ever seen a coach? Till's asking me, have you ever seen a head coach like that? He's all, and so all of that was funny too. And there was one instance when the sort of collision of people who've done this professionally, played football professionally, and then you have this movie, it's a movie, right? But he wants players to participate, and we're on the sideline there, and they position them, but it's the 1st and 10. We're the coaches on the sideline. We're calling, plays, and they position the team on we're the defensive team. They position, it's 1st and 10 on the 20 going in. And their football advisor says, okay, so what we want to go with the nickel defense here, right? Which is 5 defensive backs, a pass defense. It's 1st and 10 on the 20. And I looked at each other and said, nickel defense is a passing defense. And the guy says, the coordinator says, yeah, and I said, it's 1st and 10 on the 20. And then YA says, we're going to blitz. So we sent the blitz signal, but there was that kind of thing going on all the time, throughout the thing. And I'll just touch on this, but one of the most striking things to me was that there was a one particular play where I had written the novel on Any Given Sunday 15 years earlier. And it was a horrible call in the Orange Bowl that made no sense, that cost us the game. And, I was 10 years in the league, went to 4 conference championships, 2 Super Bowls. And that play was what stood out most in terms of a horrible experience, overrode all of that. So we're in the Orange Bowl 15 years later with the movie, and Stone lines us up on the spot where the play occurred that inspired the novel, whose title he wants to use for this film. And are you following me? This is a little esoteric, but I stopped. I said, Oliver, and I told him, I said, this is the exact spot where this play had occurred that inspired the novel whose title you want to use for your film. And he just stared at me and then turned and walked away. And then I thought, oh God, what have I done? But basically he wanted to use the title. He paid me a little money. So I'm there with these Hall of Famers. It's not making sense why I'm even down there. Until we're done, I eat dinner with YA, and then they all have their return tickets, and I don't. It was one way. So then I called the producer and I said, look, you can use the title, it's all fine. I need a return ticket. He says, I need to go home. I'm ready to go. And he says, oh, you want to really do that? And I said, well, what are your issues about the title? What was it called? Use the title, do whatever you want. But my brother was in the business, and he said there was unfair competition they had to take care of. And so then the producer wanted a personal sit down with that. And talk about it. And then I go to the meeting, and to settle that issue, he gives me a check for a couple $1,000. And that's the close. I didn't get to say anything about it. He said, here it is, take it or leave it. Boom.
Yeah. And I think you said in the clothesline that your brother-in-law, I believe, had told you that you really can't protect titles. You can protect the substance. So it was kind of your claim on a lot of money was not strong. So you take the $3,000.
No, you can't protect titles, but you can protect the expression of titles. And then the film was so different from the book I was worried about gambling a little bit in the novel. He didn't care about that. And so there was no no justification, but they felt just to be in good graces. And you got to hang with these guys, And of course, they were heroes growing up. And so that was worth the whole experience.
Yeah, I tell you, one thing about that movie, Al Pacino, when he delivers that locker room speech, 1 inch at a time or inch by inch, that movie to me was very average, ordinary, but that speech right there is one of my favorite movie moments. I just think it's an incredible speech.
Yeah, no, it's good. And Stone wrote that, and he was doing it from a sentimental place about this. And this came out. So he engineered a scene for Tittle, and he waited till the lighting was perfect. The sun's going down, the shafts are coming through the mezzanine. And then what he wants to see is, and he explains it, when this is what I knew, it was total BS. He says he wants that moment when two embattled warriors look across the field and acknowledge each other. That never happens. It never happens. And so sun's going down. He wants them to look across the field. And then to get the moment, he's got a huge camera there, and he has Pacino prompting him. But Pacino starts climbing up on the rig and acting like a monkey. And poor YA, 75. He's standing there. He has his fedora. The Stones dressed him like Landry, who he did not like. So it's all this complexity. And Tittle finally tips the fedora to the opposing coach. And then that's what Stone wanted. And the truth is that moment never happens. It's just bull, basically. People, they just shake hands and leave. There's never that, we're warriors, noble warriors, and we appreciate each other for that. So that's what I didn't like about the film.
We'll get back to NFL in a minute, because I want to correct myself. I called him Willie Carson. I was talking about Willie Lanier and Harry Carson, and I transposed them. But those are two big middle linebackers that were run stoppers.
Right.
But I wanted to go back to Edison. Now, for folks who didn't hear us last week, you played basketball at Edison. You also were all-state basketball, baseball, and football. And one thing we didn't talk about, and it's a very special moment for any athlete, is when you go to the state tournament in basketball. And you guys went to the state tournament, and I believe you played a local team, Washington Lee, which had one of the Hummer brothers. I think Don Hummer. Yeah. Well, do you have much of a recollection of that experience in that game?
Well, I was very sick down there. I had horrible sinus stuff. And so I was not feeling well at all. But what I remember, WNL, Morris Levin, the coach, he's a very intellectual guy. He's tall. He was a big guy himself, very astute, and he was a student of the game. And so playing WNL was like playing a college team, basically. And they were big. They had John Hummer in the middle. He was about 6'8". His brother Ed, who had come through earlier under the same schooling, he'd gone to Princeton, so did John Hummer, and became, great players in the Ivy League. But extremely disciplined team, and the games with WNL were always low scoring, really, 49 to something, 51 to something. He played, and we were a pressing team, and he could handle he saw it. By the time we get to the state tournament, he sees what Hensley's doing, which is full court press or half court press every game, the entire game. And he had smart guys, and he had, John 6'8" is not your usual center in the league. And so he could break the press. He figured out how to break the press. And an interesting thing was that we played at the University of Virginia. All the courts, the high school courts in our league, in our district, in the northern area, a lot of the gyms were cracker boxes. They weren't regulation college courts. They were high school courts, whatever those dimensions are.
Mhm.
So we get down there, and it's University of Virginia, NCAA, and the court is like nothing we've ever seen before. You don't even know where, you learn positions and where to move and how to move on the space you play in. Then you get down there and it's like this, and the rims are hard as a rock. So, a rebound would go with we're just totally not used to that situation. It was like being thrust into a situation we hadn't played in our whole season, So that was interesting, those kind of nuances. I was very ill, and I think Levin could figured out how to break our press, both full court and half court. And I don't even remember and I was very ill with sinus stuff, and I don't even remember what the score is. What the score was, 53 to something. I don't know.
Generally, if you're healthy, how'd you match up against Hummer? Could you hold your own against him? Because he was an All-American player.
Well, I don't know. That's giving away 3 or 4 inches. So I don't remember how we matched up. I just try to check him, get him off the board. I don't know what he scored. I don't know what I scored. But that's what you have to do when you're playing a much bigger guy. You got to positioning is everything. But because he can go up and his elbows are hitting you on top of the head, with those big guys.
Well, let's go to the Vanderbilt. Now, you end up going to Vanderbilt, and we talked about last time, and you helped your teammate whose brothers also played football at Vanderbilt. I forgot his name again.
Chesley.
Yeah, Chesley. So you get to Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt is a southern school. It's in Nashville, I believe, right? And this is, by the time you get to Nashville, it's the mid to late 60s, which is a very turbulent time. So what were the politics like on campus during that? I mean, the civil rights movement, the Vietnam, I assume it was probably a conservative school. What were the politics like at Vanderbilt at the time?
Well, it was a bubble sort of in a certain way. But what they had done was they brought in, maybe we had 4 Black students. They were integrating the SEC in sports. And so they brought in Perry Wallace, who was from Nashville, and they brought in Godfrey Dillard, who was from Detroit. And this was when I mentioned before that we'd scrimmaged at Edison, we'd scrimmaged Eastern from downtown. Mm-hmm. They had Louis West, who sort of schooled us in the new game, right? And then I get down there, and Perry is the same kind of talent as Louis West. Louis West went on, he played with the Kentucky Colonels, I think, in the ABA a bit. I don't know, I forget where he went to college. But then we get down there, and then I've got somebody like Louis West on my team now, and I was excited about our possibilities. And as we stayed in the northern part of it, as we played in Kentucky, we played in Nashville. It was fine, but then there came a piece of the schedule where we had to go to Florida, Ole Miss, and then it got ugly. And Perry had a really difficult time there. Godfrey Dillard too. Godfrey got hurt, and he didn't go on to play varsity. He went back to Detroit, but Perry had to sit there and take it. And what happened to me, and I was a big ally of his, and we really connected freshman year. He schooled me in jazz, Jimmy Smith, the organist, Wes Montgomery, we would have these conversations. He was in the engineering school as I was. So we weren't in the same class as I was trying to pursue electrical engineering before I went to just applied mathematics. But then when I had to choose, and I went to football, and then you don't interact anymore. You're not together all the time. And he just withdrew because it was really difficult taking on that role. He was the only guy in the SEC, and he got it wherever they went. And I was so glad that he went to American University. He was a law professor there, and he was fluent in French. I mean, he went to Columbia Law School, he would go to France and talk about environmental issues in French. This is the kind of guy he was. It was like, wow. There's a wonderful book called by Andrew Marinus, who's David Marinus's brother, also a DC presence, journalistic presence, Washington Post guy, from his son, his writer in residence at Vanderbilt. And the book's called Strong Inside, and it's his story, Perry's story, and very powerful. He died a few years ago.
So quickly, we touched on the Alabama upset, but obviously Paul Bear Bryant, one of the greatest coaches in college football history, and he was at Alabama, and you guys beat them.
But I didn't mention what Bear Bryant said after the game, after that game. He said, and I love this, he said, "This is the lowest point in Alabama history."
Wow.
And I thought,
that the state or the university? The lowest point in the state's history or the university's history?
in the University of Alabama's proud history, this was the low moment.
It was a rainy day. It was difficult conditions. Did that contribute to the upset, you think?
I don't remember it being a rainy. I remember it being pretty clean field. Now, we were just fired up, and he might have had some injury problems. I don't know. It was Johnny Musso was the Italian stallion, was his running back. Scott Hunter was the quarterback. And he had Alvin Samples, who was an All-American guard. Danny Ford. I think Danny Ford was there that year.
Yeah.
And we played a good game, and we beat him.
And I think your high school teammate Chesley, had a touchdown or two that game. I thought
Yeah, he did. He played a great game.
Yeah. So, well, let's get back to the Cowboys now. So, I went through some of the rosters of guys you played with, just because I followed football closely those times. But I saw Lance Rentzel on there, and I remember when I was a kid, I read his book, and it had a great title. It's an interesting title, when all the laughter died in sorrow. Now, for folks who don't remember Rentzel, not to be confused with Lance Allworth, another wide receiver that played for Dallas. Rentzel, years earlier in his career, he exposed himself to minors, 10-year-old minors. Right. And then later on, as a Cowboy, they prosecuted him for something that happened 4 years earlier. And he was lucky, I guess. I think in today's game, he would not have even been able to play anymore. But he was able to play, and he got traded to the Rams, and he did play a few more seasons. And like I said, he wrote that book. And I guess he was married to Joey Heatherton, the beautiful actress, talented actress. So what did you know about Lance Rentzel? Did you know him well?
Well, when I went with the team, I didn't know him well. He played at Oklahoma. He was a really good receiver. He was a smooth guy. He was fast. He had great hands, but he was also a Hollywood guy, which pushed Landry and the team a little bit. Joey Heatherton. So we go to training camp. So I was only a rookie when this stuff happened. Morton was the quarterback. They were all around town. Joey Heatherton, Landry. This wasn't Landry's cup of tea, that scene, And then when all this happened, it was mid-season, really. And it was shocking. That this kind of, for me, I was a rookie, right? That this is a complicated place. You're in a complicated place. With the team, and then they let him. They immediately I think he went to Minnesota for a while, if I'm not.
I know he ended up at the Rams. I'm not sure where he.
He went with the Rams. I think there was a stop in Minnesota for a while.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure. You're fresher on the subject than I am.
I cheated. So
and then it went. It went.
Right.
Pushed aside. They brought in some other receivers, and it moved. They would act quickly on these things to remove the distractions, right? So.
Well, another guy that you played with came late in his career was Mike Ditka, the future Bears coach. So what did you think? Did you get to know Ditka at all? What was he like as a player?
Well, there was nobody like him as a tight end in the league. As a coach, first they made him a specialty. He was a great guy, Mike. He was rough, tough, Chicago. What was it? There were some moments he was a loose cannon a little bit on the sidelines. And when he came in, excuse me, they made him special teams coach. Because I think Landry always admired his play. And he would get excited during games and run out on the field and curse the officials. And they had to tell him to calm down. And I think he was a character. He was a good coach. And then he sort of matured through being under Landry and learning the defenses and all and the intricacies. Then when he went on to Chicago as the head coach, still blustery as he always was, but I always loved him. He was a real presence.
Was he?
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, was he a Landry protege? Because he doesn't seem to be the same type of cerebral.
No. When he went up there, no, he wasn't. He was a tackle a man with a ball kind of guy.
He's more like Lombardi.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a butt kiss, Ditka,
Same guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one guy you played against, and this is one of my childhood heroes. You guys got to the NFC Championship game, and I think your third year. You won the Super Bowl your second year after you getting there the first year. But in your third year, you got to the championship game, and you played against the Vikings and Fran Tarkenton. So earlier, last week, when we talked about Staubach, you said that he was, great quarterback, talented, but early in his career, he didn't give his reads a chance. He would tuck the ball away and run. And that was not done. I mean, Roger Staubach was called Roger the Dodger because that was unique. But Fran Tarkenton, who was the first guy to scramble and it became accepted, and he changed the game, Fran Tarkenton. So I know you played against him in the championship game. What was that experience like, and what did you think about Tarkenton?
Well, Tarkenton Roger was 6'3". Roger was a big guy. Tarkenton was shorter, maybe I'll guess and say 5'11" or so. And he was very shrewd, very smart, and but he didn't have the explosiveness as a scrambler that Roger did. Roger could kill you. Tarkenton was less. He wasn't as fast. He was smaller. He was he's very heady, very smart quarterback. And so he could pick you apart, and scramble. So you had to be on your rush. You had to be contained when you went in there because he would get out. But that was basically it. He was a sort of master. He was a field general type too, like Roger, but not as physically imposing in terms of quickness, speed, arm. His arm wasn't great. Roger's arm was unbelievable. He could throw rockets all over the place. And you see that after a while, after being you see guys who have that kind of weapon and guys who are doing it more with guile and positioning rather than sheer force, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it seems to me that with Staubach, he's going to tuck the ball, as you said, and he's a threat to run. Tarkenton was going to buy some time back there, and you had to hold your coverage for a very long time with Tarkenton because he was going to buy 4 or 5, even more seconds, and then by then someone's going to be open.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he was hard to get if you slip free on a rush. He was hard to get because he was nifty. He would duck. He could duck. So if you're a big guy coming around the corner and take a swipe, he would duck and be gone. So you had to be more contained in how you treated it, not go for fakes, that kind of stuff, which takes a little off the rush. You can't just go pell-mell into the backfield like that.
Well, one of the, we talked about the Redskins Cowboys rivalry, which is a very special rivalry. I don't watch much football, but I don't miss that game every year. But, and Thanksgiving football in Dallas is a tradition as well. But one of the greatest Thanksgiving football games ever was 1974 Thanksgiving. And that was the Thanksgiving game where Staubach got hurt. And a guy named Clint Longley came in and saved the day for the Cowboys. And this is a guy I don't think anyone ever heard of. No. It's an amazing performance. Do you remember that game?
Oh, yeah. Clint went to Abilene Christian College out in West Texas, Division III or something. He was he had got a lot of honors playing Division III. He wasn't just some guy out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. He had good bona fides, but he came and Roger got hurt and they put him in and he had this moment that was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. I can't run through the statistics. I don't have them, but it was like, who is this guy? What? He had a kind of baby face. He's very young, sort of seeming. And he won this game that was people still talk about as we're talking about it. But he, so afterwards, I made a few notes on this. So they asked, after the game, they asked, nobody could believe this rookie came in and took this offense, this complicated offense, and did what he did with it. And they asked Blaine Nye, the great offensive guard, how did this happen? And Blaine said, it was a triumph of an uncluttered mind. So he didn't have all the stuff in there. He just stepped back and winged it. Then the next year, and he kind of his head got big after that game. So the next training camp, we go in there and he's feeling like he ought to be the starter and all this stuff. And in the locker room, we're at Thousand Oaks, California, and in the locker room, he's mowing Staubach. Now he's the second year kid for, Staubach, and he's saying bad things about him. And Roger heard him and called him on it. And Longley punched him in the face.
Wow.
And Roger had to have some stitches. And the next day, Longley was gone. He was out of there. Now he went on, he played in the Canadian League. He played for a bunch of teams. He went up to Canada, he played there, but he never had that kind of moment again. So it's an interesting bit of phenomenal piece of pro performance, that because he could do no wrong. Yeah. He could do no wrong.
He's a one-hit wonder.
He was a one-hit wonder. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So one thing we didn't talk about, but it happens when you end up going to Buffalo. You wrote the book, The Crunch. I got it wrong last time. I called it Crunch Time. It's The Crunch. Make sure everyone buys it on Amazon if it's still there. But when you went to Buffalo, there was a lot going on because this World Football League, which you touched on last time, Calvin Hill had signed a big contract, I think, with the Hawaiian team or whatever. But one thing people don't realize, free agency wasn't free agency back then. So, you were a free agent, and so you were able to sign with Buffalo, but the Cowboys still had some rights into where you ended up. Is that right?
Yeah. The whole thing with free agency was a joke, basically.
Yeah.
Because there had to be compensation. So if I signed with Buffalo, Buffalo had to give something. So it was just like a trade.
Right.
And they gave a draft choice, I think, high one, which I was happy to see. But I also signed with the World Football League because I was Calvin was upset. The Cowboys were among the lowest paying teams in the league. This was their, George Allen paid. The Redskins, they made money.
Mhm.
We were being squeezed down. We were among the lowest paid teams in the league. And this was Schramm and Landry. Not Landry. This was the management.
Mhm.
And they just, and people couldn't get it, and I think, was it Bob Hayes? Maybe Rayfield Wright. I remember in training camp, this plaintive voice drifting down the hall. They say I'm the best. Why don't they pay me like I'm the best?
Mhm.
Because it was a constant thing. And it was, a lot of people were upset about it. Calvin was. And so when the World Football League came along, we had a bunch of players. We had players jump. Calvin signed with Hawaii, and that worked out for him. And I signed with Birmingham, which went in the toilet, that team. And so I didn't get it came time to pay. But what happened then, what the World Football League did to the NFL was they realized they had to pay. And so salaries doubled overnight. So I was making, my first three, and when you come out of college, they sign you to multi-years at nothing. So, my first 3 years in the league, I think, Cliff Harris, I have Cliff Harris. Cliff Harris was a free agent
Mhm.
from Ouachita Baptist College. He made the team, and his contract was $12,000 for the season. In mine, I was a 6th-round draft trip, 6th-round draft pick, and I think my initial salary was 16. Now, this was only a little bit. I had an engineering degree. This was only a few $1,000s more than I could have gotten if I got to work as an engineer in the field. And so that's how they kept the top on. But after the World League, boom, double. By the time I got to Oakland, I was making 6 figures. So it was an amazing kind of situation. And they sat on it as long as they could.
Well, in Buffalo, you played with the Arlington native named John Leypoldt.
Right.
He's one of the few people that I know of who never played college football. He played high school at Washington and Lee. Yeah, he kicked for them, and then he went around and played in semi-pro football, and he ended up getting a pro contract. And he had a couple great years, and then he flamed out in horrible fashion on Monday Night Football. Mm-hmm.
I don't remember that, but he was a conventional kicker. He had this big square-toed thing. He was a nice guy, but kickers lead a separate life. In the league, you don't, and he'd be at various social functions, but you got Simpson, it was Tony Fritsch in Dallas, same thing. It was kickers are they live in their own universe. And usually the guy who kicks the extra points and the punters are a team unto themselves. And so it's interesting that way. So Leypoldt, he was a good, he played a long time, but then I think in 87 or so, he had a heart attack and, died suddenly. But I think he played for 8 or 9 years, actually. But you say he was from Arlington, but he didn't. Where did he go to high school?
He went to Washington Lee, and he
went to WNL.
Yeah, he played football there. It's funny. There's almost no record of him anywhere. I just happened to find his name in the WNL Wikipedia as a famous alumnus, and then there was a game where he missed, I think, 2 extra points and 3 field goals on Monday Night Football. The coach blamed him publicly, and that was it for him.
That's right. And I remember that vaguely.
Yeah.
They went off the side of his foot.
Yeah.
But
Bad.
he was I was only there one season, so I didn't know him. I didn't know him well.
Yeah.
I knew my line guys and coaches and stuff.
So then you end up, we talked about this before, you end up going to the Raiders. You had to spend a very tough year in Tampa Bay, and it really almost ruined. Well, you did not want to go back to Tampa. It was so bad. But you know, you're a lifeline, playing for John Madden, real players coach, understood the players.
Right.
The players had responsibility to do things to get themselves ready for a game, to, as you said earlier, to make adjustments on the field during the game. Loved it. I believe that year you played with Cliff Branch, and you had played with Drew Pearson in Dallas. I've always wondered, those are two players that are not in the Hall of Fame. And when I was a kid, I was a Steeler fan. And those were two receivers that were always tough for the Steelers to stop, Pearson and Cliff Branch. What do you think about those guys? And do you think they're Hall of Fame worthy?
Drew just went into the Hall of Fame.
We did. Okay.
He
Good.
did just this year.
Great.
He went in with Cliff Harris at the same time.
Oh, awesome. Excellent.
And Cliff was my roommate for 5 years there. And I was supposed to go up to the ceremony first round got canceled because of COVID. And then he went up last month and was inducted, I think. I couldn't go. But Cliff,
yeah.
He had light speed. He was a sprinter. He had light speed and he had tremendous hands. And he was a great guy. And so was Drew, but Drew was slower. Drew was sort of a route guy, clutch, great hands too. He was much bigger. Cliff was a mite. He was a skittery. He was skittery, but I mean light speed. Boom. And Drew was a little bigger and not the different style and just as great. But Branch was more like big play guy. And so that was basically it. They were both good guys. Drew came in, he came out of Tulsa. Roger loved him. He was clutch and he deserves to be where he is today, you know.
And Kenny Stabler, you know, I had a respect for him. I mean, I was a Steeler fan, so I couldn't have loved him, but I had so much respect for him. What kind of guy was Kenny Stabler? He just seems like kind of a good old boy.
He was a complicated guy, but he was charismatic. And interestingly, he was left-handed. Mm-hmm. Snake, you know. And he, which was after I got to Oakland, I started looking at this, and I roomed with those guys. I roomed with Banaszak, Biletnikoff, Snake. We were in this suite, and I thought, it was, you know, training camp life in Oakland was like nowhere else, you know. But so I got to know him pretty well, and Snake, because he was left-handed. And this is an Al Davis thing. So most of the time, you play a team that's right-handed, the quarterback's right-handed. You got the big lineman to the quarterback's right. They run right a lot. And then over on the other side, you have smaller players, smaller line, smaller guards, smaller tackle, because they're right-handed. And most teams are right-handed. Quarterback's right-handed. So, but with Oakland, Stabler was left-handed. So defenses would compensate. So you'd have against the right-handed team, your defensive, you would get big guys to play the left end and the left tackle. And then on the right side, you'd have speed guys because they're running away from you most of the time. And they're throwing. And so you got speed guy on this side, you're coming to the quarterback's blind side. He's looking to his right, and then you're back here. Boom. So that was the operative stuff. Now you throw Stabler in there, and Davis did this. he had Art Shell and Gene Upshaw. Art Shell was 320 and he could dunk two hands behind his back.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, he was an perennial all pro.
Yeah.
And a great guy too, Art.
Yeah.
But he was on the left, he was the left hand, Snake's left-handed. So you got Shell on the speed guy, and he could stay with him. And then if you have to run for yardage, you got a guy 320 over a guy who's 240 instead of 320 to 320. So on the Raider line, you'd have Matuzak at left end at 6'8" and 290, and then I was over on the right, speed guy. Matuzak wasn't a speed guy. So, and Upshaw was the same way. He was 270, 275. So you had these bad boys on the left side, Snake as a left-handed thrower. And if you look at the Super Bowl game against the Vikings, they ate up Jim Marshall, who was 230 or 220. And I don't know, was Page was the right tackle, I think.
Yes, I believe it was Marshall, Page, Carl Eller, and there was I forgot the other guy. What's that?
Right. But that was you see what I'm saying? So you have the big people here and the speed guys here.
Yeah, Marshall was the right tackle. He was on the speed side.
Marshall was right in like I was.
Right, yeah, right in. That's right. Yeah.
And you watch the Super Bowl game, you just start looking at that footage from this perspective, and Shell just ate Marshall alive because he was, not that Jim Marshall wasn't a great player, but he's outweighed by 40 pounds, and having to play nose up on that, you just can't do it.
So a guy like Mark Van Egan just had a field day, probably, huh?
Yeah, they just, and Mark Van Egan himself was maybe 230, 6'3", 230. He was a big fullback. He went to Colgate, great guy, family man, with that Boston brogue, Mac.
Yeah.
And he didn't really fit the Raider image. He was sort of, his mouth was open all the time. But he and Banaszak, but Mark was a good guy too, and a great player for a long time.
I think, I hope I don't get my ears messed up, but one of the teams that put you out was your former teammate, Craig Morton, called on with the Denver Broncos because he didn't like being, as you described last week, platooned with Staubach. He wanted to be the man. He'd won a Super Bowl, or at least got there on one as quarterback. And that was the Orange Crush year. Tom Jackson and I think Otis Armstrong, I believe, was the running back. That was a really talented team. I believe that was the team.
Randy Gradishar.
Yeah, Randy Grab. That was the team that put you guys out. Is that correct?
Yeah. That year.
Yeah. Did you and Craig have a relationship? Did you guys talk at all?
Oh, sure. Yeah, and in fact, the first one of my fondest memories was playing them during the season, and their regular left tackle got hurt, and so they had to put a rookie in there. And I think I got 4 sacks on the rookie, because Craig wasn't mobile, and you're coming from the backside, and we would comment to each other as the game went on. I said, "You need to get some protection over there,"
Yeah.
Craig had a great arm, not mobile at all, versus Roger.
Yeah.
And he went to Cal. He was kind of a dandy quarterback, but a great guy. And so that was I thought it was great that he could go up there and have a career after, getting moved out by Roger.
Yeah.
He wasn't done by any stretch. Great arm, pocket passer, basically.
Well, Madden gets out of coaching and becomes an incredible broadcaster. And then Tom Flores comes in. And it's interesting because Tom Flores and Jim Plunkett, I believe both are Latinos, and which is not very common for the NFL, especially I'm sure back then. What were those guys? What were those guys like?
I think that's an understatement.
Yeah.
Tom Flores was an old AFL quarterback himself.
That's right. Yeah.
He came up, I think he played for the Raiders in the old AFL. So Al Davis knew him and was comfortable with him. And he knew his stuff, but he's a very quiet guy.
Mhm.
And so then Plunkett was as well, very quiet. And he had where did he come from? San Francisco.
Or maybe the Patriots.
Patriots, that's right. But he's from Menlo. He went to Stanford.
Yeah, it's Stanford.
Went to the Patriots then, and he was sort of beat down by then. And then under the Raiders stuff, he came back. He had a great arm. He wasn't as mobile. He was big, and performed well. Performed well. And he was in the Bay back home. He was in the Bay Area. A lot of people loved him. And Snake was in contrast to both Flores and Plunkett. I mean, Snake was charismatic and he did what he wanted, and then these guys were very quiet, unassuming people. Players, and Tom Flores, pleasure to play for, but he also, like Madden did, he has Al Davis up there overseeing everything, and of course, do this, do that. So that was always a consideration in Oakland, but both great guys.
Do you think the way you described Flores, he's almost kind of an accidental coach, but do you think his success was predicated on what Madden had already built and Al Davis behind the scenes, or do you think Flores could have been successful anywhere he coached?
I think he was particularly suited for the Raiders, given his history, given his understanding of their philosophy, given his understanding of the dynamics. I think he fit in there. He found a way to do it. He made whatever accommodation. Madden had to make accommodations too. I think every Raider head coach had to do that. But I think he was a good choice, and the record shows that, I think.
And you've touched upon Al Davis a little bit. We haven't talked that much about him, but he's a very complicated guy, I assume, the way he comes across on TV. What was Al Davis like? He was a brilliant guy. At least you can't ever knock his success.
I think I told you the story about his. He wore all black clothes all the time. He's from Brooklyn, and so he fancied himself a kind of tough guy. He had a ducktail, black hair, ducktail. He drove a black Cadillac Fleetwood Brougham with black tinted windows and no license plate. So he affected that Brooklyn Don, driving around. But if you look back at his history, he came out of military ball. I forget where he was in the service. Maybe it was Fort Belvoir too.
He was at Fort Belvoir at one point. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he was he could recognize talent. And so he became this great scout. He could identify. I think he put together great military teams there. So when the AFL started up, he fit right into that mold. He was the coach then. And so he had a philosophy about the long game, and he knew talent. And so he put together great teams. Those teams were fun to watch. George Blanda and, back in the day, Mr. Shoulder Pads, Curtis, or was he Kansas City? Anyway, those old AFL teams, I used to watch them all the time because they were so exciting. And then he never really gave up his position of coach. So as owner, he maintained being a coach too. Yeah. And so these guys had to struggle with that. And of course, he's a successful guy. He knew the game. He knew money. and Madden's autobiography, he talks about how he had to dealt with how he had to deal with Davis, and he would have to sell him on different ideas, and so he writes about the accommodation he had to make with that forceful figure.
Yeah, well, I believe you were in Oakland that terrible year when Tatum paralyzed Darryl Stingley. I believe you were there that year. And I read Tatum's autobiography. It was a great book. They call me Assassin. You know, I never really understood that mentality that you got to hurt someone like that. But you know, he was.
Well, with that, we should take a moment with
yeah.
that.
Okay.
Because Jack Tatum, he looked like Genghis Khan, you know, and he was 225 pounds as a free safety, but he was contained. He wasn't a ferocious player. We remember the hit in the Super Bowl where the helmet came off. Jack wasn't a ferocious player. It was physics. He weighed 225. He could run a 4.6. All he had to do was show up.
Yeah.
He breaks on the ball. He was very contained. He was soft spoken. He was a very good, really good guy. And I was on the field when the Stingley play happened, and it's preseason, and Jack, and then we played in the game, and then the next day watched the films, and Jack was fooled. He played free safety. He started off in one direction, and then the Stingley was coming across, and then Grogan threw it, and he's flat-footed. This wasn't the Minnesota hit. He was flat-footed, and he just leaned over, and Stingley left his feet to catch the ball, and then hit Tatum, who wasn't even running. He was just bent over like that. And it was a freak. It was a freak hit, and he cracked his. And then this really told me about Madden. Appall everybody that he didn't get up, and there was just a pall over the entire stadium. And they called for the ambulance and get him out and took him to the local hospital. And then the first thing Madden did was he went to the hospital. We played the game. The game was over. He made a beeline for the hospital where Stingley was. And he gets there, and they're fitting him with a halo brace. Goes down. And he says, okay, where's Fairbanks? Where's the general manager? There's nobody from New England there. So he goes out and he calls the airport, and he says, put me through to the New England charter. And he gets Fairbanks on the phone and says, what the F are you doing? What are you thinking? Of course, they were all in shock, right? And they stopped the flight, turn around, and put off the business manager. But this is Madden's heart, on full display. And then, they take off, and their plane starts leaking fuel everywhere. They take off. They have to come around and land at San Francisco instead of Oakland to change planes because the dang thing could have blown up. So it was you have this vortex of craziness. And then Madden, he visits Stingley regularly. So we go back to camp, and he goes down, he visits Stingley regularly on through the rest of training camp. We trained in Santa Rosa, and the reason I know about the intimate details of this is because I was new on the team, and training camp was Santa Rosa, and we play, and then I'd go back up there because I didn't have anybody in the Bay Area. Everybody else would go home and go they all live there. And so I come in for breakfast the next morning, and there's John. And so I sit down, and then he just dumps this whole story. And I said, oh my God. And I've written about that, about that whole thing. But to me, so this was another instance of Madden revealing who he was. I thought, wow.
It's very unfortunate, but
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a way I could talk football with you all day, but I did want to get your view. So you had your ups and downs with Landry, Coach Landry, very difficult guy to play for in some ways, even though he's a winner. How did you feel about the way he was kind of run out of Dallas? He had a couple bad years, and they were undermining him. They were bringing in players. He didn't have any control of what they were bringing in. And you mentioned this last week. This happened earlier in his career when they brought in Herb Adderley and some of those Packers.
Right.
But then when Jerry Jones bought the team, they basically just let Landry go. Now, this is a guy, when you think about all the things he did for football, I mean, he changed the game in so many ways.
Absolutely.
How did you feel about that? Was it bittersweet for you?
I was watching it from New Mexico, so I wasn't close up to it, but I thought it was pretty shoddy, actually. And then Jerry Jones, the inflation of becoming an owner, and then he wanted to be in charge. He wanted his style stuff, and it's always a mess at those junctures, at those collisions. Mm-hmm. And then I think if Coach Landry was ensconced there, he was settled there for decades, and so it was a hard thing to for him to negotiate, I think, and I think it hurt him. I think quite a bit is what I gather. And then, however, I don't remember how it was. Then they bring in Jimmy Johnson. Mm-hmm. Completely different. And that's what he wanted. Different style, different everything. And I think it might have, the flex never, Dick Nolan in San Francisco used it for a while. And I think it all went by the boards as we've become a pinball game, passing game. It's all gone. And I think he was probably feeling that turnover to the next generation of players.
Yeah. So, well, look, Pat, I can't wait to order the Crunch. I'm going to try to get a copy of that. I'm not sure how available it is, but I'm looking forward to reading it to see if maybe Oliver Stone should have just stuck with one of your books, either the Crunch or On Any Given Sunday. But I do look forward to actually reading both. And I really enjoyed this. So hopefully we can keep in touch. You've given me some great referrals for future podcasts. I'm going to definitely follow up on those.
Oh, great. That's great.
Yeah, but hopefully we can keep in touch. If you're ever in DC.
I'll drop you an email. I don't know if I haven't been there in a while, but maybe I'm due for another trip,
Yeah.
But that would be fun. I've really enjoyed the chats, and there aren't a lot of guys out there like you are with a head for the game and sort of curiosity about inside stuff. Most people couldn't care less about the nuances. So that's refreshing for me, and I'm sure for the other guys who are talking to you guys. Grant Hill, I watched that. It's great. And I think you can see it in them, guys who they're saying, oh, this is somebody who cares, about this stuff. And so that's always fun to run into somebody like that. So I appreciate it, Julian.
Oh, no, but I feel lucky you had a career. I love football and basketball, and you did things effortlessly that, and you're very humble about it, but you just, wherever you did, you just succeeded. You got to NFL as a 6th round draft choice, and you were never really a football first guy, but then you're like, what do I have to do to be successful? And as we talked about last week, you led the league in sacks at least twice, maybe more. It's hard to tell. But it's just amazing things. And then the writing and the things you've been able to do. And I guess you're an engineer by trade, which is not necessarily a writer. So you're a very,
I lasted about, my engineering career lasted about 3 months. I went down to Dallas and I took a job with E-Systems, which is a black box company. My father was a military officer, so there were all these. And 6 months was all I could take. And that was it. I haven't since been back to that. I've been more pulled to this other art, life in the arts, so to speak. So, but I was able to do it. So,
I tell my son that he's not a natural writer. He's a very logical guy like me, a math guy. And I found over time, I became a really good writer, not in your league, but a usable writer, because the logic that you use, once you have a formula to write, you're able to write really well. It just your mind thinks differently. Right. You come across your writing differently, but that kind of thought process can still make a very effective writer.
Yeah, well, I think they're technical things. Writing, they're technical things that you learn. It's like learning how to shave. Once you learn the technical things to do that makes a piece, and then you want to put something down, you just follow the technical stuff and it'll take you where you need to be. That was hard for me to learn. I had to be schooled in that by experience. Guys, like structure is everything.
Yeah.
Structure is everything.
Yeah.
And that carries you through. And then you have to do it, which is another. You have to sit down and you have to do it.
Yeah.
So.
And when you practice law, it's the same thing. You learn the structure, how to write, and then once you learn that structure,
just pour it in there.
Just put it in there, and then you go back and you change things so it's not redundant and say things simply. And
right.
Yeah. So
that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, Pat, look, I really enjoyed this. Let's keep in touch, and I look forward to doing this in person one day.
Great. We'll do it.
Okay.
Thanks,
sounds good.
Julian.
All right. Have a good day now.
Bye. You too.